my fellow artists. Another week, another day, another dollar, another drawing. I want to start off this video by giving a huge shout out to Charlotte Savely. She let us use the reindeer photo from her awesome portfolio that she has on Instagram. If you like animals and nature and just being out in it, definitely check out the link that we'll provide to her Instagram in the description of this video and show her some love. Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Now, in this video, I'm showing you guys how to draw something a little different. Up until this point, we've only drawn a frog, a snake, and a spider. A reindeer is a little different because it's different texture. So this animal is covered completely in hair, and even its antlers are in fuzzy velvet in the photo that we're going to be referencing. So in this tutorial, I'm walking you through the process that I use to build tones of charcoal, specifically for all of the different values that we see in the hair in this reference photo and the antlers as well. So that's going to be kind of the main focus of this tutorial, is how to get that really soft look when you can't use a lot of defined lines. Yes, having said that, let go.
Okay, so in this one we're going to be using a graphite pencil and a hoo-hoo eraser, a pentel click eraser, a mono zero eraser, and a kneaded eraser, but we'll only use that as needed. And then also a sandpaper strip. We're also going to be using soft, medium, and hard charcoals. We are also going to be using a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3 smudger. And an extra piece of paper for checking our tones before we lay them down on the paper. And last but not least, the brush. Okay. So first things first with this drawing is we're going to identify the main lines within the reference image. So in this case, that'll be the antlers of this reindeer here. So what I'm doing is I'm just going through and I'm very lightly laying down essentially the outline. I like to call this framing my drawing because we work with charcoal. This is just a preliminary step and nothing more. Or we're going to be laying the charcoal down on top of this graphite outline, so the outline itself doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be able to frame the charcoal nicely when we go ahead to lay that down onto the paper. Now, a trick that I have found when it comes to tracing out and framing charcoal drawings that have a lot of hair texture, like this reindeer does, is that if you just trace out where there are tone breaks within the hair itself in the reference image, that'll be a good starting point for you when it comes to actually laying down the charcoal. So say here, for example, where the eye is, there's a good tone break there between very dark value and of course complete white space. So we'll highlight that. And we'll take our mono zero eraser and just get rid of some lines that we don't want. Kind of clean this up a little bit. All right, now we're ready for our charcoal. So we're going to take some soft charcoal here and grind that onto the sandpaper strip along with some medium charcoal, so we have a couple different values. Then we're going to lay our sandpaper strip down on top of the paper here, and the paper, of course, we use to check our tones before we actually lay them down onto the actual drawing itself. Okay. So essentially what I'm doing is this is the initial layer. For those of you that don't know, we use the 3-layered method, which is a charcoal drawing technique that I use, that I identified through just spending a lot of time drawing. And so here basically what the 3-layered method allows us to do is, because soft charcoal has the least amount of binder in it, it tends to spread the easiest, and it tends to have a lighter value than medium or hard charcoals. So we're going to lay that one down first. And the big thing to remember is every single line that you draw and every tone that you put down with your charcoal must be designed to convey the underlying form. And basically what I mean by that is when you look at the reference image, say here for example, the antlers that we're working on, we know for a fact that those aren't flat. We know that they're rounded in nature. And so our job as the artist is to convey that with our charcoal. And one of the big things that you can do to help yourself kind of convey that form to the viewer's eye is making sure that whenever you lay down charcoal, that you keep in mind what exactly it is that you're drawing. So in this case, I know for a fact that I'm drawing antlers, and I know that those antlers are rounded in nature. And so when you're playing with the tones, kind of like how I said in the how to draw a spider video, we know for a fact that those spider legs were round. So what we did is we darkened up the outside edges of it, and then we kept the inside of the spider leg lighter, and that conveyed a sense of roundness to the viewer's eye. Well, here in this drawing with this reindeer's antlers, it's a little different, but the principle of that concept is still very much the same. See how here with the front of the antler, how I was able to make it look rounded. Now, the cool thing about the 3-layered method is as you add more and more tone and you build the value onto the paper, you can put those tone builds to a darker value on the edges of the antler. And of course, if you go too heavy, you can always go in with your eraser and you can lighten those up if you wish. But now what we're going to do is I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to hit this just very lightly, very light pressure. And what this is doing is this is adding to the gradation between values for us. It makes it look nice and smooth, which is good because in this case, being that this reindeer's antlers are still in full velvet, it has a very soft look. The velvet hasn't fallen off the antlers yet, and because of that, it's not hard bone like it would be if the velvet had fallen off. It's really soft and fluffy even. So we want to make sure that we convey that with our drawing. And notice that now I'm taking my Mono Zero eraser and I'm just highlighting lighter values within the reference image. And here what I'm doing, now I'm taking that 3rd layer, which is the hard charcoal. And the hard charcoal has the most amount of binder in it. And because of that, it holds a really nice, rich, dark tone. And so when I lay that down on top of the soft and the medium charcoals, and I very lightly apply it across the different tone breaks that I have applied in the reindeer antler here, I get to keep the tone breaks underneath the layer of hard charcoal, while at the same time being able to have that texture, that fuzziness that is very much prevalent in the reference image. And so this is a really cool way to apply your charcoal so that you can convey that look onto the paper for your viewer. And here what we're doing is we're just building it up. Remember, tone breaks and the value scale. Always keep those two things in mind with whatever you're drawing, because the greater value you have between complete dark and complete white space on the value scale, the more your drawing will pop. Okay, so now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the adjacent antler. I'm starting with a nice light, soft charcoal, and this one has a little bit more white space. This antler has a little bit more white space in it than the first one, but what I'm doing is I'm just going through and I'm very slowly building up the tones within the antler. And here on the bottom side of this antler, you can see it's a little darker than the top, so I'm going to stay away from the top for the most part, and I'm going to just build up those darker values on the bottom of the antler. So now here I'm going to take some medium charcoal, and I'm going to hit every spot on the reindeer's antler that is darker in the reference image. And this is essentially how I draw pretty much all my drawings. You know, you start with the soft charcoal first, you hit everything that is light, and then you just build on your darker tones from there. And here's kind of a cool trick. You can stand the smudger up on end, and as you can see on the reference image, we have some darker lines of some darker values in this antler. And so this is one of the cool tricks that you can use to make sure that you have some nice tone breaks. And essentially what these are implied lines. They're not defined lines. Remember, we touched up on that a lot in the last tutorial video with the spider. And of course we'll touch up on some defined lines and implied lines in this one as well. The focus in this video is very much tone breaks, and I really want to focus on how to build those tones, especially to convey texture, being that we're working with fur for the first time in this tutorial, or we haven't worked with it in the past. So, and then here we have the front part of the back antler, which is actually behind the first antler that we drew. So we want to lay down that initial layer of soft charcoal, and now I'm going to build that up with some medium charcoal here, some darker tone, kind of get that to round out a little bit. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hard charcoal, and I'm going to go in and I'm just adding a textural layer, nice and light, on top of all the tones and the tone breaks that I just built up with my soft and my medium charcoals. And I'm just touching the paper very lightly. I'm not pressing hard at all. And this is just adding an extra layer, which will help convey the tone breaks and kind of make them jump out at the viewer's eye versus being kind of blasé before. Now I'm going to take my brush, and I'm going to blend this all together nice and light. I'm not hitting this very hard at all, because if you hit it too hard with a brush, you risk smudging everything that you just laid down, so you lose your tone breaks and you lose pretty much everything, because it all smears together and it doesn't look very well, and then you risk hitting it with an eraser and overworking the paper. So you want to be aware of that. It's something to keep in mind. But here we're just going in and we are continuing to build up the tones. This is one of those things that is kind of up to you. But for me, I like to have very rich tone breaks within my drawings. That's just my preference. Not all artists are that way, but that's the way I'm going to teach you guys. Okay. We're just going to continue to build this up. You can press a little harder for those darker values that you want to bring through. And of course, remember, complete black, complete white, and everything in between, that is the optimal application to really get any type of drawing to jump off of the paper and have a viewer really appreciate the drawing. Shows that you took a lot of time and that you took the value scale for everything that it was worth. But now we're just going in doing some detail work, just lightening up. Here, one of the reasons why I do this with Mono Zero erasers, because I want to show you guys all the detail that you can get with different techniques. Now here we're going to put some defined lines on these antlers. Now remember what I say about defined lines, definitely a preference thing. The thing that I want to show you in this drawing is with defined lines, they don't always, one defined line doesn't have to be one width. In fact, it can start off really thick and then it can go really thin. Okay, so now we're going to take the number 3 smudger and we are going to do some hair. So I'm standing this up on end, and I'm just flicking the paper just ever so gently. The thing with hair that you have to be careful of is that because it is such a soft texture, you can risk overworking it and over defining it, and because of that, it might not look the way that you want it to. So here, this is kind of what you want. You want to just be very light from beginning to end so that you don't get that really dark point in your charcoal pole. But the trick to this is that you want to look at the reference image, and in this case we're working on the ear of this reindeer. If you actually look at the reference image, there are no actual super hard lines. It's all tone break. And this, of course, is what we would call a bunch of implied lines. They're not defined, not at all. And because of that, this is where your understanding of tone break and value scale really comes into play for you as an artist, because you are going to use these principles to convey an overall aesthetic for your drawing to the viewer. And this is why you'll use a lot of smudger work. But here what we're doing is we are just making sure that we have the proper tone, and we are identifying the tone breaks, and we are identifying the tone breaks within the reference image. Because basically what we're looking at as the artist is we want to imply form. Form is crucial whether you're drawing a portrait or an animal or anything like that. Form should be paramount to your approach. And so what we're doing is we're looking at the form of the hair around this reindeer and how all that hair just kind of lays on top of each other. How does it flow across the neck and the face of this reindeer? Those are questions to ask because you want to understand how are you going to pull those lines. All of these little tone breaks for the hair that we're using with the number 3 smudger here, these, just like the antlers, are a foundation layer. So now here what we're going to do is we're going to take a medium charcoal, and you have to be very careful with this technique here. So what I'm doing is I'm not necessarily going in and highlighting lines and all of that. I don't want to do that because that's going to make it look really cartoony. Rather than do that, what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm just highlighting the very dark values and the hair that is dark in shadow on the ear. And you can spend literally hours dressing this up, but for the sake of time, I'm kind of hauling through this one for you because we have a lot to cover. But the trick to hair is to just make sure every line and every application that you put down is very light, very light. Hair by nature is very soft and fluffy, so we want to make sure that we convey that with our charcoal. But now here I'm just going to highlight the eye. And put in some dark charcoal with my hard charcoal here. And I don't like this line, so I'm just going to take my Mono Zero eraser and I'm going to just erase that real quick. And then I will put down a fresh line with my hard charcoal here. There we go. That looks much better. But yeah, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I am laying out the tone break between the dark value of the skin around the reindeer's eye. And so for here, rather than just scribbling in a bunch of dark charcoal that's all one shade, what I'm going to do is I am still sticking to the underlying form of the reindeer's eye here. If you actually look close at the reference image, the eye is sitting in kind of a pocket, and then it has very much a brow over the top of the eye that's rounded, and then it has skin underneath that kind of rolls out and definitely has a form to it. So we want to keep that in mind. So much of the time with drawings like this, it's just paying attention to detail and always having that underlying form of the reference image in the back of your mind. So that when you go down and lay down your charcoal, you're able to convey that form with all of your tone breaks and your value differences. So now here I'm going to take the same pencil, I'm going to take my hard charcoal, and I'm just going to highlight some parts that I want, make that eye nice and black. There we go. And so now that I have those tone breaks in there, it just makes it look a little bit more realistic. It shows that it's not just a black hole in the middle of the reindeer's face, and it shows that we cared enough to hold that form true in our drawing. Okay. So this is kind of a cool trick that you can do. You can go through and very lightly with a hard charcoal. You wouldn't want to do this with a soft or a medium charcoal, and just go through and kind of accentuate the tone breaks that we have. I mean, if you look at the reference image, there are no real defined lines in the reference image of this reindeer, so you want to go very lightly when you do that. But here, essentially what we're doing is we're just taking our smudgers, and we are keeping the form of the cheek of the reindeer in mind, and we're also keeping in mind the form of the chin and the nose of this reindeer. Even though these are foundational charcoal layers, they are still just as important as the last defined line that we would throw on this drawing. But now here what we're doing is we're building up the foundation layers of the nose of this reindeer. And these don't have to be perfect, not at all. We're literally just focusing on form right now. So now here we'll take some medium charcoal that is slightly darker, and we're just going to continue to build up the tones. If you look there, this front part, so the front nose of this reindeer is actually perfect to practice tone breaks on. Here we go. I'm going to put a nostril in here. There we are. And one of the reasons why is because there are multiple shades, and I'm going to show you guys multiple ways that you can convey the tone breaks to really bring those shades across in your drawing. Okay, so here I'm going to put a nice defined line on the top lip of this reindeer. And I'm just going to go in with my medium charcoal here that I have in pencil form rather than on the sandpaper strip. And I'm just going through very lightly, just accentuating and highlighting tone breaks that I laid down with my soft charcoal. And then I'm also building major spots, like say here on the side of the reindeer's nose, where those values need to be very dark and need to be on that side of the value scale. And even though this looks grainy, remember we have smudgers and we have brushes. So here I'm going to take a smudger, and I'm just going to hit this real quick and just blend it. Be very careful that you don't push the define line. We're running this alongside the define line. And then I'm just going to continue to build these tones and blend them together. Even though they're blended, the viewer's eye still will be able to pick up those different tone breaks, and they'll be able to pick up the underlying form that you're trying to convey with your drawing. But you can go through the hair bits and you can add different tone breaks as well. And the cool thing about this is typically the darker shades that the darker the shade is on the hair, with a mono zero eraser, when you hit it, you can actually sell and convey more hair. And I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to take our brush, and this is just continuing to improve our gradation, which is our blend amongst tones. And it's also serving to give us a nice soft look, which is perfect. That's what we want, especially in this drawing, because this reindeer is covered in hair. So it's a very soft looking animal versus like a frog or a snake, which is, you know, a completely different kind of texture. Okay, so here we're just going through and we're just making sure that we're not adding too many lines. I'm just more or less highlighting the fuzz that's on the front of the reindeer's nose. And then I'm going through with the hard charcoal, and I'm just continuing to highlight those tone breaks that we laid down with the smudger. And this is one of the reasons why I love charcoal so much, is because the more you play with it and the more you continue to build on what you already have, the more realistic it'll look. So this is that trick I was telling you guys about with all of the darker values in the hair. You just hit it with your Mono Zero eraser, just quick little pulls, try to make sure they're not all the same size. And you can go through and you can really make it look like it's got a bunch of tiny little hair. And then you just take your hard charcoal, stand it up on end, make sure it's super sharp, and just very lightly highlight where you hit it with the Mono Zero eraser. And boom, all of a sudden you have little fine hairs. But I would have to say, out of all the things that I've ever drawn, especially in the wake of animals, hair is probably the single hardest thing to draw, because it very much has its own rules, like its own way, its own approach. It's a very specific type of texture to draw, so just keep that in mind. The Ohuhu eraser, I just wanted to show you guys. I mean, it's a power tool just like anything, and it gives you it allows you to get into really tight spaces, and you don't have to risk overworking the paper. But here we're just going through and we are continuing to ensure that even though we're highlighting the tone breaks with our hard charcoal, we're making sure that as we lay down these lines that we keep that underlying form in mind as well. And now here what we're going to do is we're going to take the brush, we're going to add some soft charcoal, and what I'm doing is I'm just building up shadows that are in the reference image. And of course these shadows that I'm building up with the brush are not definitive by any stretch of the imagination. We can go in with Mono Zero eraser and we can break these shadows up if they're too clumpy, and just continue to convey more and more hair. So that's not a problem at all, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we're just going to take the Mono Zero eraser and we're just going to do the same thing. Just break this up a little bit. There we go. And I hope you guys are starting to see that just because you lay charcoal down one way, that doesn't mean you can't manipulate it with a couple other tools to really bring across a certain type of look that you're going for. Like here in this hair, for example. The hair, it looks like the hair on the back of the neck's a little longer. And so we're just going to hit that real quick, and boom. Now here I'm going to add a couple more defined lines. The thing with these defined lines is they're going to make these antlers look a little heavier. They're just going to give them some body, and of course I'm not going to bring these lines and keep these lines all one way. And I think that's all the more defined lines I'm going to add on to the antlers. But you know, as you see things, you guys can go in and you can dress up these values to really bring across the kind of texture that you want for your hair on a drawing like this. It's completely completely up to you. But I'm just going to take my brush here and I'm just going to do the exact same thing that we just did before. I'm going to add some soft charcoal like this. Now I'm going to take my Mono Zero eraser and I'm going to go in and I'm just going to highlight it. I'm just adding texture here. That's all this is, to really kind of sell the realism on this piece. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you were able to pull one or two things from this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Voila.
So, yo, that is pretty much it. That is my process to how I go about drawing and building up tones of value with my charcoal when it comes to drawing hair. Now, if you're struggling and you're like, you know what, this no, this isn't me. Just stick with it, because hair is a monster for most any artist, and it just takes time, it takes practice, and you can't give up. You just gotta keep going. So, having said all of that, that is it. That is all I got for you guys in this one. And remember, if you guys enjoyed this video and you find yourself enjoying all the videos that we make here at Messer Creations, you should definitely like and be sure to subscribe. Oh, and also when you subscribe, be sure to hit the bell. Ding! So you guys can be notified when our latest and our greatest videos come out. My name's Braden. You guys have just been tipped off. I hope you guys had fun, and I will see you in the next one.